Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the show tonight. Tonight, we've got a couple separate little clips. As you know, or maybe you've just figured out that this is pre-recorded. We're not actually doing the live stream tonight. I've explained why we have to do that a couple of times. But just so you know, it's not a live stream. But we've got this segment that we're going to talk about. And then we've also got something we did just a little while back about lessons that you can learn from the Great Depression. And I think it's just kind of going into the situation that we're probably headed into in the next few months. I think it's a good idea to kind of readdress those basic things, because it seems like that stuff's going to matter more than it ever has coming up in the next few months. So first off, I know, how are you doing? What you up to? Are you traveling around doing staying out of the cold, basically?
Well, yeah, it's in the 30s up here at night. I'm in Vegas again for a little bit. I had to come up to register my vehicles and do all that stuff, since this is where my residence is, my official residence. So as I travel around the country, you have to have your vehicle smog checked here. So I got to bring it in and get it smog checked and do all that, and then get it registered. So up here
even
doing
newer
that
vehicles?
for a couple of days. Huh?
Even newer vehicles do?
No, I think that you go 2 or 3 years here on a new vehicle, but my van has to be smogged every year. I have a 96 Ford, that my little drive around the country van that I'm working on. So that has to be smogged every year until I change my residence to somewhere else.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right. So I suppose I did a video the other day. We talked about the Vesta Instafire, and I don't have the website pulled up. I do have this shot right here, but it's above shot, and it's kind of hard to see the whole setup. But I do have a couple video clips that I played, of the video I made over at Survivalist Prepper. And it's kind of a cool little unit. We talked about this a week or so ago about heating your home. And it's a neat little unit, because it actually, I totally geeked out on all this stuff the past week. I tested tea light candles. I tested Sternos. I tested temperatures. I tested how this thing worked. I tested the clay pot method. You remember I told you that pot? I saw a dude talking about how it was just sweltering.
Yeah. The zero pot.
Yeah. I didn't get the same results as that dude. So, but
it wasn't sweltering.
No, not one bit.
A tea light candle didn't overheat your house.
No.
At the end of the concept of the zero pot is great. Heat up the clay pot. The clay pot radiates heat. All that good stuff. But at the end of the day, candles and everything put out a specific BTU and a British thermal units, a set amount of heat, and a tea light candle doesn't put out a lot of heat. So
yeah.
Well, I appreciate that stuff. It's, you get what you get out of a tea light candle,
Yeah. And that's kind of the what I got from it, and what I expected from it too, is there's a guy, I think it's Riverside Homestead Life. He had a small room, and he had some big Crisco cans. I tried that too with the Crisco candle. But he had the big number 10 cans with like 4 wicks apiece. And he had 3 of those set up, and it maintained the temperature in that room, but it didn't raise the temperature. Like, it was 30 degrees outside. If he would have started at 30 degrees, it has still been 30 degrees. But he started at 50 degrees, and he maintained that temperature. So it's all about the 12 wicks that he had burning at that point, is mainly what it is. But with this Instafire, I got a couple clips, because it was pretty cool because it cooked. And it did pretty well, and it's got let me pull this up over here. It's got the 3 cans of Sterno, which is, and this is, the Sterno is, it says extra hot. There we go. It's extra hot, and I was wondering if it actually is extra hot. I don't know if that's going to focus or not.
Yeah.
But, I tested out different types of Sterno, and the actual Sterno was about 10 degrees. Actually, I've got a slide right here. What I did was I boiled water, or I tried to see what temperature. The best way I could do it to get accurate temperatures across the board was to see how hot it got water. So the Instafire, the actual extra hot stuff, actually did about 10 degrees hotter than the Sterno brand, and this really cheap 7-pin stuff that I got was 124. So it actually did pretty good. And the tea light candles, 102. And that goes to exactly what you were saying about the size of the flame and everything. So you get 3 of these
burning. How many tea light candles was that?
Just one underneath a chafing dish.
That's not bad though. I mean, I figured, 100 degrees from a tea light candle. That's more than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Me too, actually. I knew it was going to be way lower, but so the extra hot on these works pretty well. Let me play this clip of how well it heated Lisa's room. And this unit actually did fairly good. The clay pot, I don't even think it raised it 1 degree. But this unit actually did pretty good. I'll play this. It's a couple minutes long, but it shows how well this thing worked. All right, so we're up in Lisa's art room right now. We've got this on, just turned it on. We've got a few thermometers around the room set up, and it's about 72, 73 degrees in here right now. This room is about 8 by 10, so we're going to see how much this heats up the room in about an hour. It's only got one window, and this would be the room that we would probably go into if it was a situation where we needed to heat up a small area in an emergency situation. So let's let this run and we'll see what this gets this little 8 by 10 room up to in a half an hour, and then we'll check it in at an hour. All right, so we've been on for about a half an hour now, and it takes about 10 minutes for it to heat up. So, probably like 20 minutes, but we are at 74 now. So it's gone up a couple degrees. Some of these read 73, a few of them read 74. So a couple of degrees in a half an hour, a couple of degrees in 20 minutes or so. So we'll let this run a little bit longer, about another half an hour, and then we'll see where we're at there. And my thought is that even past that, it's still going to go up a little bit, a couple degrees. So after a few hours, maybe 5, 10, 5, 6, 7 degrees. I mean, who knows? But let's go ahead and let this continue for about another half an hour, and then we'll see where we're at. All right, so we're going on about an hour here. And with these thermometers, this one closest to it says 79. Now this one over here behind the unit actually says 80. So, and then the one over there actually says about 80 as well. So I'll bet you that's where we are. So from 72 to 80 degrees in an hour in this small 8 by 10 room is pretty good. And I imagine it would get even hotter than that, say after 2 hours. And again, like I said in the beginning, if you start off at a lower temperature, you're probably going to see higher increases as well. But this thing is as advertised. I mean, it works pretty well for what it does. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, you do smell the Sterno smell, but it's not overpowering. It's not bad. And as a matter of fact, it's more so when I leave the room and then I walk back into it, I can tell the difference. When I'm in here, I don't really even notice. I notice that it's hot because 80 degrees is pretty uncomfortable, but it's not bad. So the little space heater does work. So in an emergency situation, this would definitely be a cool little piece of equipment to have. So going back to what you said, as far as the amount of energy, you could probably get the same sort of output and all that if you had 3 Sterno cans burning and a clay pot radiating heat and all that. So it's not like this is the only way you're going to get that done, right? But it is kind of cool because it's purpose built, that supply that is purpose built for that.
How long do those cans last before they before they go out?
These are 6-hour cans, and I actually tested that too. I was geeking out on all this stuff. I tested the 7-pin. I didn't test the Sterno because I didn't have 6-hour cans of Sterno, but I assume they're the same. But they both went about 6.5, almost 7 hours. So they actually do last the time that they state they do, which is pretty cool. So, but the main thing I wanted to test on this was the cooking stuff, and I tried some Legacy Foods refried beans, which was kind of cool. I screwed up the recipe because it does take a little bit of time for the water to come to a boil. So when it says to use 1.5 cups of water, by the time it came to a boil, it was probably closer to 1 cup. So they were in this video I'm going to play. They were they were some chunky refried beans or crusty refried beans. But once I fixed them up, they're actually, Lisa and I actually had dinner, had bean burritos that night, and it's actually pretty good stuff. And then I also fried an egg on here. Let me play this video of how this works for cooking, because I think this would be my main use for it. I'm not worried about heating up a room or anything. We've got options for that. But if you live in an apartment, you live in a small house, you don't have a fireplace, this may be a good option. Or like you, maybe in an RV, something like that. This would heat up your trailer pretty damn good, I think. All right, so let's cook something here with this Vesta. I've got this right here. What I'm going to do is make some refried beans, Legacy Foods refried beans. What this says is bring 1 cup of water to a boil, and then add 1.5 cups of the beans and cover and simmer for 5 minutes. Throw this back in there. I've already got 1 cup of water in here. So we'll throw this on, see how long this takes to heat up. All right, so we're at about 5 minutes here, and I may need to add, I added more water, but I may need to finish this up on the stove. But, I mean, it looks like refried beans. I'm going to taste it here in a second as soon as it cools down, and we'll see. But for now, like I said, I may take this upstairs and doctor it up a little bit. But I figured while we're here, I might as well fry an egg and see how frying an egg works. So I'm going to do this real quick. Let this pan heat up, put an egg in there, and see how that works, and how long that takes. All right, so it took just a couple minutes to melt this butter. Now I'll throw an egg in there and see how this cooks. And while we're at it, I'll try some of this refried beans. It needs a little bit more water, but it tastes good. It tastes just like refried beans. I'm gonna fix that up upstairs and maybe make a little egg and bean burrito. But this is cooking pretty quickly. I don't know if you can see it in there. It's cooking pretty well though. So I think maybe with boiling, using something like Legacy Foods or long-term food storage, maybe boil some water in a separate pot and then grab the amount you need and put it in there. That way you know you've got the correct amount of water to make the recipe work right. But like I said, right now it's not an emergency. Nothing's easy in an emergency. But right now I can take that upstairs and doctor it up and get it to work. Tastes fantastic though. Let me see if I can flip this egg here without destroying it. Close enough. All right, so an egg cooks basically the same as you would cook it. So I'm sure like eggs, bacon, anything that you'd cook in a pan, maybe you want to fry up some Spam or something like that. Anything you want to cook in there would cook pretty well with 2 of these Sternos, possibly even just 1 of them. If you had a couple pans this size, you could put a couple on there, heat up some canned corned beef and hash or whatever you wanted to. But this works pretty well. All right, so here we have it. Some eggs and really dry fried, refried beans. All right, so I went up and doctored up these beans, like I said, because this is Joe Biden's America, and I don't want to waste anything. So these are actually pretty good, and you added a little bit of water to them. It's really, really nice and consistent. All right, so I had to add that end in there because I didn't want to make it look like Legacy Foods refried beans were freaking terrible because they look terrible.
No, they're good.
Yeah, they are. They are really good.
I like Legacy Foods stuff. When the pandemic first, they started doing the lockdowns. I went up to Michigan. I had a bunch of freeze dried food, so I ate Legacy Foods for a while, and I did other companies too. I thought Legacy was probably the better of of the companies out there.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't promote a whole lot, but if you go over to the shtfshop.com, we sell legacy foods over there too. This whole thing wasn't meant to be a promotion for that, but if you are interested, I think I'm going to be doing a lot more videos and testing some stuff out and doing stuff like that here in the near future. So I think it's fantastic stuff. There's Augustin Farms. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different types of long-term food, but it's good to test all that stuff out before you go into it, and then all of a sudden you find out you got something you just can't stand. So, but so far I've liked all of Legacy Food stuff. So,
you going to test out any cast iron there instead of the bird killing Teflon?
Well, and that's what I'm going to do as far as like Legacy Foods and stuff. I'm going to do it in my wood burning stove. Grab our cast iron pot, put it in there, test that out. I'm just going to test out a whole bunch of SHTF type cooking methods, and I'm going to use Lisa as the guinea pig too. So I've got the sun oven, so I can make some pretty good stuff. I've got the wood burning stove, cast iron, all that different stuff. So I'm going to be eating a whole lot of prepper food, more than we usually do here in the coming months. So,
nice.
One thing I wanted to talk about today, and I saw this video from Magic Prepper, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, because what it's titled is "Don't Store This Food for Long-Term Prepping." And we've talked about fear porn and all that stuff before, right? So I was going into this, and he's not that type of guy. So
no, he has a really good channel.
Yeah, yeah. But I thought about that when I first saw this, because he was talking about Funfetti. I'll just put up this picture right here. I saw this, and I was like, oh, come on. But he actually makes some pretty good points, and actually something that I didn't know. So it wasn't that. And like I said, he doesn't do that anyway. He's actually pretty smart about all the stuff he talks about. He's got a pretty interesting channel, and he knows his stuff, and he articulates it well. So, but I'll just play the beginning part of this where he talks about it, and see if you actually knew about this too. I'm sure with our audience, they're so smart, most of them probably already did, but I didn't know. Let me play this real quick.
Get right into it. Don't prep this type of food for long-term storage. It's just not worth your time, and it's not going to last, and it's not going to provide you with what you think it will. And when I say this kind of food, what I'm referring to is instant mixes, like instant pancake mix or instant biscuit mix, or any mix that says just add water, right? It's a very appealing option because all you need is water, and suddenly you have a full meal, and it sounds like a good idea. Now, I do suggest having this in your rotational pantry, but there are some issues with these instant mixes you need to know about for why they're not good for long-term storage. And in fact, there have been reports that people have actually died from eating instant pancake mix well past its expiration date. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. So, what are the issues?
So I don't want to play the whole video. It's a very good video, and I'll leave the link below this. But it was interesting because and then I actually did some research too. And I think it causes, or it can cause in some people, like anaphylactic shock and stuff like that because of the way it's made. I don't know if it's preservatives or what it is, but I just thought it was kind of interesting because I was like, we store stuff like that all the time. I have pancake mix that I don't really even pay attention to the expiration date. We just use it. We don't eat nearly the amount, especially now that the kids aren't here, nearly the amount we used to. So, it just kind of sits there. I never really even thought about that. Did you know that like the baking mixes and all that potentially could be harmful?
Well, some of them, like the pancake mixes, if you store them, like some of them tend to blow up. I don't mean explode, but they'll blow your bag up. If you have them in and I know this from personal experience, I'm not doing it, is like it blew up a 5-gallon bucket. I wanted to see what it would do. And it took a couple of years, but it cracked the bucket and everything. So yeah, no, stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like he said, put it in your rotational pantry, like something you use, something you keep track of. But I'd keep your long-term storage food to, a lot more stuff that's less processed and a lot more stable.
Yeah. I even watched a video. I was going to say flour, but I watched a video. I don't know who this lady is, some sort of recipe lady or whatever, but she was talking about why not to store flour long-term. She had a whole list of things, and maybe I'll go through a couple of them, but she had a whole list of things not to store long-term. And I was like, Flour? I mean, if you store it, I suppose if you just keep it in the bags it came in and you're storing it out in your garage or something like that, probably not a good idea because you're getting pests and weevils and all sorts of different weird things in it. But if you store it right, like preppers do, in Mylar bags, vacuum sealed and all that, flour's fine, I think. But flour isn't like hyper processed like some of these with all the preservatives and stuff in it. It is processed, but it's not to the point like some of these are where it's got baking soda. I think Magic Prepper mentioned that in his video. The baking soda and things like that are in those mixes is what causes that anaphylactic shock in very few people, but it is a potential problem. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the anaphylaxis would be from. That's a reaction to something, right? That's an allergic reaction. So I don't know what would cause the anaphylaxis that wasn't there before, but maybe it makes some sort of byproduct or something like that causes problems.
Yeah, I read about it and I can't remember what the hell it was, so I'm not gonna make stuff up here. But look into it. There's articles online that talk about why that happens. A couple of the things that this lady talked about, and I want to get your thoughts on a couple of them. Nuts and seeds, pretty self-explanatory, right? Anything with oil and stuff in it is probably going to go rancid after some time, regardless how you store it. So those probably aren't, and when I say long-term, I'm talking, over 2-3 years, some of this stuff. What she had in there, and I'm not sure how many people know this, but like peanut butter, if over like 3-4 years can start to go bad. I've had peanut butter that I've used that's been that old and haven't had an issue. I know a lot of people that as long as it's stored properly, unopened, all of that, I've never had an issue with that. But I suppose peanut butter does have oil and stuff in it, so I suppose it could. I don't know. She was talking about chocolate, which, yes, that's kind of obvious. Chocolate just doesn't go bad necessarily, I don't think, but doesn't it just get stale, or does it actually go bad? Do you know?
I don't know. I've never had chocolate last long enough to go bad.
Yeah, that's true. A couple other ones. What's that?
I said it calls to me.
Yeah, I know.
Don't let me go bad. Eat me.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because we had a whole bunch of candy from Christmas and stuff, stockings and stuff the kids didn't take home with them. I ended up freezing it because I didn't want it. I wanted to extend the life of it. And it was about a month later, I ended up taking it out of the freezer.
You can eat frozen chocolate.
Yeah. But I ran out of the other stuff so quickly. I was like, okay, I can't not eat chocolate. Chocolate is my Achilles heel. A couple things she was talking about, though, that make sense. And I think a lot of preppers understand more about this stuff than the average person because we think about it so much. But she was talking about when storing cans, no dented cans or anything like that. That one, to me, is sort of obvious and probably a lot of people, because if you are storing it for long term, that's more time that, something could get in there, or whether it rusts on the inside or something could go wrong with it. So if you do have dented cans, use them quickly. Sometimes you can't avoid it. If you buy a case of like 12 cans of something and they get tossed around the warehouse or whatever, you're just going to have those. So either use them quickly, check them out, but don't put them in your long-term stockpile. And then the other one, which I think is obvious, we talk about all the time, is store what you eat, right? Eat what you store what you eat. If you're going to store that stuff, make sure you are rotating through it. That's another benefit of the legacy foods, those long-term prepackaged foods. Not as healthy for you as this other stuff, but it is that set it and forget it, right? You've got a bunch of it. I've got a lot of it as well. You set it and forget it, and it's going to be there in 10 years from now. As long as it's stored in the proper way, it's going to be the same thing as it is right now. So
and I think if you have the space and you're planning on buying a bunch of long-term storage food, consider buying a freeze dryer and making your own, because the amount I spent on a year's worth of freeze dried food, I could have bought in a freeze dryer and done my own. Is it as easy? No, so eventually I did buy a freeze dryer. Right. And so, think about those things if you're just getting started. Like what's your best avenue? Now, having some of it on hand to get you through, to make sure like, okay, it's an easy, you can go online, if you have the money, go online, buy it, and next thing you know, it shows up at your house, and now you have 30 days, 6 months, whatever, how much you buy of food set aside, and to use it as a adjunct to other food, right? My plan is to use it as an addition to other food that I'm adding, because a lot of it's carbs. You can buy the protein packs of freeze dried meat and all that stuff, but a lot of what you get are carbs and stuff like that. So think about how that's going to, kind of like the supplements that you're going to add to a meal, like, to build it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got some Augustin Farm stuff too. And they do like carrot slices, vegetables and things like that. And like you were talking about with a freeze dryer, if you make that initial investment and you have the time to actually do it and the skills to, store that stuff where it's going to last a while, you can save quite a bit of money. Plus you're not getting all the preservatives and all of that stuff in there. But I tell you what, I do like the fact of that long-term food storage stuff. It's not our entire pantry. It's probably not even a third of our food storage stuff, but it is a quick way to just bulk that up. Like, hey, I need a couple more months. Boom. You've got it. It's a little bit of investment in the beginning, but it's there for years and years and years and years to come. So I do like that stuff. I've thought about the freeze dryer thing, but that's a big pinch in the beginning. And it's if I do get it, and I probably will at some point, but if I do get it, it's got to be, I've got to set aside, I've actually got to use it, and I've got to make sure that I get the most out of my investment that I can.
Yeah. So I think if I were to do it again, I bought the large. I think Harvest Right just came out with an extra large. But if I were to do it again, I'd probably get the smaller medium, because they can plug into a 110 outlet. You can use a 110 outlet. And if you get the small, it only has 3 trays. I think it's in the small, but you can put it up on a countertop. So it's right there. It makes it easy to use. You can, just set it up, go. And so it's just constantly, you'd be constantly freeze drying if you were using it a lot or a couple times a week. So they have trade-offs. The large, you can do a lot more food at once. But if it's something where you're like, for you and Lisa, where you're freeze drying some leftovers or something like that, literally take it, you can dump it in there once you know what you're doing, throw it in there, close it up, and freeze dry that meal. And it's just constantly evolving. So the smalls and I think you can get a small for about $2,000, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe $2,500, and they have them on sale a couple times a year over at Harvest Right. So again, if it's something you use, then it's going to pay off in the long run. I think a freeze dryer is, if people, like when young people get into prepping, or if you have like a family member or friends or somebody that's getting into it that are younger, the freeze dryer is one of the best gifts, because it's going to pay off for years to come. Like, they can generate so much food over time with it that it would pay off. It would pay off over and over again.
Yeah. One of those smaller ones, you could probably do like homemade MREs and stuff, right? That way you're packaging one thing, and then if you do that, 3-4 times a week, pretty soon you're going to have quite a big stockpile for, as far as those meals ready to eat things. And you've got the variety you can do with them as well. So say you do freeze dry, let's use carrots as the example. One last thing on this. You say you do freeze dry carrots. It isn't the 25-year shelf life, right? You're looking at a few years? Is that what it is as far as DIY?
No, I don't know about carrots specifically, but most of the stuff ends up with you're doing the same stuff that Legacy Foods has. All that stuff's freeze dried.
So as long as you store it correctly and oxygen absorbers.
I would, you have a vacuum sealer, and you can vacuum seal it up. You can throw an oxygen absorber in there if you kind of stuff. But there's a lot of options to it. And, you can take that pantry, that food pantry that you have, and just using your freeze dryer, you can extend it like right there in your kitchen. You don't have to have the buckets stacked up and all that. But no, there's all kinds of things you can do with the freeze dryer. It's what's the guy's channel? Retired at 40 is the guy's YouTube channel, and he freeze dries all kinds of stuff. He does stuff where he goes out and he'll buy like a cup of coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, one from Starbucks, and one from I don't know, somewhere else. And then he pours them in and he sees which one freeze dries. And it's not just coffee. It's like the food, it's the double macchiato latte with extra whatever in it. And he'll show you which one's freeze dries, and he'll go off and, freeze dry cup like his coffees.
Yeah.
And then have the coffees on hand, and you just, add water to it. I think part of the thing with freeze drying too is eating it. So you figure out how much water you need to rehydrate what you're doing with it. So you get good at that as well.
Yeah. But taking notes.
When I was in Baghdad, like we didn't go out, you couldn't go out shopping. Like that wasn't going to work out. You're not going to go out in town shopping. And the PX had like 2 little or 3 little tiny aisles of food it wasn't much there. So a buddy of mine had a freeze dryer, and he would freeze dry, or his wife would freeze dry like ingredients for pizzas, all kinds of stuff. Constantly send it over. So it's freeze dried food, but it didn't have all the salt, because you're not putting all the salt and preservatives in it. It's what you have, and he'd rehydrate it, and we ate like kings all the time from that.
So you can basically freeze dry anything. I mean, I'm sure that stuff with fat
limits
content.
There's limits on what you can do, like high sugar foods and stuff like that. You're kind of limited. But your basic, again, it gets back to like what we talked about a little bit ago with your stuff, right? Try to eat unprocessed, right? Focused on those unprocessed foods, like when we were talking about the pancake mix and all that. Right. And so that way, when you stick to unprocessed, your carrots, your vegetables, your meats and stuff like that, you stay pretty good on things.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of along with that too, is instead of the pancake mixes and the biscuit mixes and stuff like that, store the ingredients for each of those. And we've talked about this a couple times, but if you store those ingredients, you can make those, fairly easily. Butter is one of the hard ones, and Legacy has we've got some Augustin Farms powdered butter. Not the greatest, but in bread or in something like that, in a bowl of oatmeal or something, probably okay. By itself, like buttering a piece of bread, it just wasn't very good. But it's a better than nothing thing. So, but again, like we said in the beginning, try this stuff out. We were talking about DIY projects, but try this stuff out. Try the food that you're going to eat. Try these different prepping techniques and all that before it comes time to where it's actually game time, and you're stuck with what you have regardless. So try it out, see if you like it or not, and figure it out alternatives if you don't. So. Mm-hmm. All right, so I think what we're going to do now is get to the segment on living or lessons learned from the Great Depression. And like I said in the beginning, this is something that I think, coming up, who knows how it goes, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about it for the next couple of months as well. Who knows how it goes, but it sure seems like it's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse, we don't know, but I think it's important to kind of get back to the basics and everything. So Brian and I wanted to talk a little bit about learning from the Great Depression. And I know this is something that in the preparedness community, it's been talked about a few times. But I think with the way things are shaping up, especially this coming year, the things that we're seeing right now, and, even possibly down the road further from that, I think it's important to think about some of the things that people used to do on a daily basis that was just normal, where you look at it. Most people these days look at the stuff that used to get done, and there's just so many advances in technology and so many different conveniences and all that stuff. I'm kind of lost track of what happens if you had to go back to doing stuff like that. So we wanted to talk a little bit about learning from some of the things that they did. I've got a few slides on this. Do you have anything to add to that, or you just want to jump into the slides, Brian?
Let's jump into it.
Okay. This first one I've got here is live like your grandparents did. And this is not, I'm not saying here in this that we've got to change our whole lifestyles around like at this very moment and do things differently right now. But it is that stuff that's important to kind of what would I do if, or what would I do, if this happened, or what would I do if that happened? We hear stories about our parents and grandparents, and we tend to think, like outhouses. Lisa's mom comes to mind because they didn't have plumbing in their house. They lived on a little farm, didn't have plumbing in their house, and had to go to an outhouse. We think of stories like that, and they're like, oh man, I'm glad I live now and not back then. But I think it's important to kind of listen to those stories and think about what would I do if I did have to do that, because there are a number of disaster situations that could mess up critical infrastructure, and you not be able to, maybe the water's not running and you may not be able to use that, the plumbing and all the other things.
Yeah. So I think we need to look at it through their eyes, because especially if you're watching this video, odds are you live in a developed nation. We live in a developed nation. And, you know, we've talked about before, where do you go from a developed nation if things start going south, right? Well, you go into more of an undeveloped nation. Can you get stuff? Yeah, but it's just not as convenient and all that. Well, I think, you know, when I grew up, you know, we've talked about it. My grandparents, you want to talk about recycling, all these people that are really big on recycling, they made sure that they didn't have to buy new tinfoil because they washed it. My grandmother would wash her plastic baggies, right? She's like, so she doesn't have, so that way it would actually cut down on the amount that they need to produce. And guess what? That's conservation for all the people that are really into that. But what did that also do? It made it so they didn't have to spend as much money. It made them take what they had, and they got used to taking it farther. You know, my grandfather, when he passed away, I remember as a kid, I remember seeing it. And then after he passed away, you go down there and the garage, all of his boxes for all of his tools, like his toolboxes, that he made them all. Like he made all those toolboxes by hand. So he conserved on that money, and they were great toolboxes, and he learned how to do that. You know, I mean, and we've lost a lot of that stuff. So I think trying to look at how your grandparents lived in most cases to see how did they stretch a dollar? What did they do to be on their own? I mean, if you don't have the ability to get a box, well, you make a box. Yeah. And how many of us would just go, I guess I don't have a box.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into this one right here, which I accidentally pushed over before this, but do it yourself. And you were talking about that. We've lost that type of that mentality, because everything is made for us, and it goes into the next one too. But everything is made for convenience and all of that these days. So we've lost that ability. It's really easy to get a hold of somebody to, you know, come fix this or come fix that for you. So it's really easy to just, it's convenient to just go to the grocery store and get a boxed meal, right? Instead of actually cooking from scratch. So a lot of people don't even know how to cook from scratch. A lot of people wouldn't even know how to, you know, build a simple little toolbox. Now, there are some things that we have our limitations, right? You know, I've talked about it before. Our water heater went out a couple of years ago. I'm not messing with that because I would end up making the situation worse. But I always look at things before I pick up the phone and call somebody, I'm always looking at things of, can I do this myself? Can I fix this myself? And during the Depression, that it wasn't asking a question. There wasn't a choice, basically. You had to, if you wanted something, you had to make it. If you wanted, or you had to grow it, or you had to do whatever you could to make that happen, because it wasn't, DoorDash wasn't coming to your door, or, there wasn't a big freezer section at the grocery store. That stuff wasn't there. And we need to kind of plan for when that stuff isn't there. We need to plan for that stuff ourselves, I think. All right, so the next one I've got here, and you sort of alluded to this earlier with reusing things. Reuse things whenever possible. These days, everything is made, everything's disposable. Nothing is made like it used to be made, where it would last forever. And I think that's a lot of that. Most of that is on purpose, because companies need to generate more income. And what a better way to do this if you need to buy a new coffee maker every 6 months or year or something like that. So it's reuse things whenever possible. You were talking about tinfoil, your grandma and tinfoil. My stepdad used to turn baggies inside out, wash them out, and let them dry out. Yeah. I mean, that is the type of thing that we sort of lost all of that. We just throw things away now these days. Instead of, if something breaks, instead of trying to figure out how to fix it, and things have gone down in price so much because everything's made in China. And we've gotten used to everything's so cheap. It's almost hey, for $50, instead of having to deal with this, I'm just going to toss it out and I'm going to go buy a new one. And that's the mentality everybody has these days. And we need to get back to It kind of like we were talking about with the chicken nuggets. If that stuff is not there, what are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do about that coffee maker if you haven't tried to figure out, or figured out how they work and done that little MacGyver stuff? You're going to be clueless when it comes down to time to fix something.
Well, and it's like you mentioned a coffee maker. You know, here at my dad's, my brother-in-law has like this fancy coffee maker. It totally sucks. And I use a French press, right? And like one of the things that, like with a French press, I can take it. I have a water, like a plug-in water heater, a plug-in kettle. Dude, I throw that in my truck. I have an inverter in my truck. So as long as my truck's driving, I can stop and make myself coffee somewhere, right? You know, French press works really good. It doesn't break as long as you don't break it. Where that coffee makers, eventually it's going out. You know, same thing. I think a lot of preppers use this like cast iron pans.
Yeah.
Right? That allows you to reuse your pans all the time. I think there's a lot that we can conserve on, and that, you know, the problem that you get back with the disposable stuff too is look at some of the stuff that we buy in our preparedness world. Like, is it disposable? Is it meant to last, or is it garbage, or do you know how to get multiple uses out of it, or find which is the best for, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. You don't see it too often. Like when people talk about planning their whatever bag that they're going to, you know, going out to the woods bag, a lot of people will put a folding saw in there. You know, all the folding saws eventually are going to like kind of have a problem. Why not bring an axe? And I don't mean you need to have like, you know, a double-headed axe, but like a hatchet, which could be used for self-defense if you need it. It can be used for a lot of stuff. I mean, I like the saw for cutting small limbs and stuff, but at the same time, like there's other ways to think about some of the stuff that we have that's typically disposable, but that, you know, if you purchase it right and you put some thought into it, that you might be able to get a lot of years out of something and multiple uses.
All right. So the next one I've got here is don't pay for conveniences, or at least cut things out. And this is, I put in here, this is the way the world runs right now. Everything is a subscription plan. Pretty soon, our lives are going to become, if the World Economic Forum has anything to say about it, our lives will be a subscription plan. Everything we don't own, everything we use will be based on subscriptions. But that's the way everything is kind of gravitated towards these days. Everything is $5 a month here, $10 a month there. We've got all the different streaming services, right? You can get meal delivered straight to your home. You can, like I say in here, you can do anything you want basically these days without even leaving your couch. And other than going to the bathroom, I mean, I guess you could do that too if you wanted, but you could literally just about do anything you wanted without going. I mean, you get food delivered to you. You can get groceries delivered to you.
Yeah. Look at the lockdowns.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Could you imagine that happening 100 years ago? People would have flipped out.
So, yeah, I mean,
but these days it's easy. Sorry.
Well, and I think it's good. You have to focus on I think going to the effort to do stuff and make it happen is, and I don't think this is some old way of thinking. I think it's a better way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Like actually getting out. It was funny. I watched some TikTok video someone put on Facebook, and it was this, I don't know, late 20s-year-old person. And she, was losing her mind. Like, wait, what? Like she had gotten a job, and they had her 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And she's losing her because she's never had to deal with it. Right. I mean, she's like, nobody was working for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So like, and she's just coming of age. Like, I got a job, and she's like losing her mind for a good minute or two about why would I like making me go into the office. And I agree. I think there's a lot of times we make people go in the office just because they have the office space. And I think if you truly want to, you know, err on the side of your employees, like having a better life, don't make them sit in traffic so many days a week. Like figure it out. Like you can have, when I was working in DC, my company all the time, right? Oh, no, everybody has to be in here every day. And I'm like, I don't need them in here every day. Like they can do their stuff from their phone and at home some days, you know, and I had some people driving an hour and a half to get to work, like stay home today and work from home kind of thing. So anyhow, she's losing her mind. I think there's something to be said still, even though, like I said, it's nice to be able to work from home, about going in the office and having physical engagement with people. Right. You know, I think there's a lot of things to working with your hands, to doing stuff, to getting out. Go outside, go for a walk, go do something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as cutting things out, again, this goes back to what I was saying about this isn't something that has to be, done right now, but you need to think about some of this stuff, especially with the economy, the inflation. Think about all those things, because it nickels and dimes you to death. You don't think about it because you're paying 14 different companies 10 or 15 bucks, but it all adds up into that big pot. And when it comes time to actually try to build up your food storage, build up all of this preparedness stuff, because you see some things coming down the line, the less you're spending on all of these conveniences, the more you're able to spend on the things that truly matter, as far as preparedness. Plus, you can save a few bucks and maybe have some cash put away, put in the bank, wherever you decide to keep it. Save that stuff, help yourself get out of debt and all sorts of different things. Yeah.
And I hate the money apps, the Venmo, anything that touches your bank account. I hate those apps.
Yeah, me too.
And I ended up signing up for Rocket Money a while back. And everybody's like, oh, it gives them access. Hey, here's my thought. All the banks have access to all my money, all my records of all my transactions. And the US government has access to all their stuff. And like, they're not going to say no. So I get it. Right. At the same time, I got Rocket Money, and it told me all my subscriptions I had going on. So I got and it gave me warnings about, I'm like, oh wait, I forgot all about that subscription. Like, because you're right. How much of our stuff today is hit the button, especially if you get an annual subscription. Now you're not going to see it for a year. And then the next year it comes around, and before you even know it, oh yeah, it billed me again. So I really liked it because it let me track all my expenses a lot better. I'm not a good expense tracker. I hate dealing with finances. Like I'm very good when I was dealing with finances, when I was running a big program, but my own stuff, I hate dealing with it. So if you're like me, it was really good for letting you know every subscription that you have and stuff that's coming up. And so you get ahead of it, and you can just I was like, wow, I probably ended up dumping, I don't know, $75, $100 worth of subscriptions that I'm like, why do I still have this?
Yeah. And you think about that on a monthly basis, that's a lot of food. It's becoming less and less these days, but it's still a lot of food, or things that you could spend on preparedness, and bettering your situation rather than the entertainment stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sort of goes into this next one, which is avoid debt like the plague. Being in debt, in my opinion, being in debt is the opposite of preparedness. You hear all the time some people talking about how they're not going to be able to collect on debt anyway, so you might as well just rack up your debit cards. Guarantee you that there may be one or two situations where that's true, but there are 150 situations where that's not. So not a good idea to do that. Being out of debt frees you and gives you the ability to do whatever you want, any way you want. Being in debt means you are beholden to somebody. So it's tough to get out of debt, say with a mortgage, but the other things, car payments, credit cards, all of those things, just pay those down as much as possible, because that is, if something does happen, sort of like the Great Depression, you're going to be less affected by that. And pay with cash, like I said in here, while you still can, because who knows how long cash is going to be around.
Yeah. Well, that's like the Dave Ramsey thing. He does that Dave Ramsey snowball, right? Figure out what your bills are, and you get one of the small ones that you can knock off, get it paid off, and roll that into your next one. Once you get that bill paid off, roll it into your next one, so that way you pay off. And the big thing is not going back in debt. It's hard because I think a lot of people have credit cards. And with the economy being the way it is, right? And they end up, there's some people just get to that point where they slide into like, hey, I burned through my savings, I don't have anything left. Now I'm on the credit cards, And so it's like getting in a debt snowball. It's really difficult, man. It's a hard thing. And if you're in debt, don't beat yourself up over it. Like, hey, just do your best to work on it. And, some people are very good at cutting back. Other people aren't very good at cutting back. If it's hard for you to cut back, then focus on it, make it a thing. you know, because like, make sure when you go to buy something that you have to justify it to yourself. Maybe you say, hey, I'm not going to buy anything. Whenever I'm going to buy something, I'm going to wait 24 hours and think about it, write it down. Because we could all justify why we want to get something. Like, oh no, literally, it's kind of an emergency that I get this thing right now. Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah.
And that way you make sure, give yourself your own check and balance, help get yourself a bit forward in that.
Yeah. I guarantee you there's maybe 10% of the people listening or watching our show at any given time, maybe 10% of them are completely debt free. Probably more like 5%. I know I'm not, and I've been trying for 15 years and I'm still not because stuff always sort of pops up, but it is decreasing. And it is one of those things that, like you were just talking about, that I'm always trying to figure out other options rather than a debt. But sometimes there's just not that option other than getting a loan for something because something has to be fixed or something happens. So not always an option, but do the best you can for as long as you can. And maybe someday you'll be lucky enough to be completely debt free. I know there's a few people out there. I've heard of them or heard from them. And I'm absolutely jealous. You are one of them.
Dude, luck was involved and things happening right and all that. But at the same time, it's a good goal to shoot for. And, the hard part is when you're just starting out, especially for younger, but I think it's why, even where you say 10%, and that's of an older community, because like when you're young, that's when you get into debt. Yeah. You think about it, like that's when you get in debt, and how many people spend so long trying to climb out of that, especially, you look at the interest rates, right? I don't know what some credit cards are 16% or whatever, but if you miss a payment, now it boosts you up to 30% or some craziness, right? Like it's a really vicious cycle, and it puts you in a big hole.
Yeah. If it weren't for mortgage and the occasional big expense that always it almost like clockwork for me, it seems like once a year something springs up. Mortgage is the big one. Other than that, the debt isn't a huge deal. I can't stand credit cards. I can't stand giving away 15, 20%, whatever that number is, just to be in debt. You're paying them 15 or 20% to be in debt. I can't stand that. It drives me nuts. But yeah, it's important to at least try. The next one I've got here, lessons from the Great Depression, is community and family are important. During the Depression, people, they kind of had no choice. They depended on each other, family members, communities. This goes into sort of, the whole, I don't know if I have bartering on here or not. I should if I don't. But it goes into that whole system of you've got to, kind of like what we were talking about in our last show, where you've got to, the only thing you need to really be concerned about is yourself and your family when it comes to preparedness. In a depression or even recession type situation, you could be looking at, some sort of bartering system being set up, whether that's local markets, working within your neighborhood. Maybe you're working on a larger scale where it's the whole town or whatever. But think about those different things. So you do need that community. You do need that family, because nobody can do it by themselves. You can't grow everything that you're going to want to eat in your own personal garden. Maybe you could, I don't know, but it's going to be a whole lot easier if you have that community and have that family, plus the morale aspect of it as well. You're not going to be that loner.
Yeah, no, you need people, man. Community, it's important. Like you have to plan on that in your preparedness. That's why in the survival pyramid, it's actually a thing. Right? Like if you don't have community support, you're not going to do well for long. Right? Maybe you just need an extra set of hands. Maybe just having someone to talk to and hang out, like, oh, wow, there's somebody I'm not just sitting here, by myself kind of thing. At some point you need to go to sleep. At some point, you're going to get sick. Now, all that good stuff. You need to have community and people that you have good times with and go through bad times with.
Yeah. And that doesn't just go for a large scale, like massive depression type situation. It could be recession. It could be, I mean, if everybody grew a garden right now, like we were talking about a couple shows ago, victory gardens and all that, if everybody did that stuff, and there were farmers markets where the neighborhood would get together and barter goods and stuff like that, rather than grocery stores, which I could see a situation like that, coming up when we talk about shortages and the economy and all that stuff. All of that stuff is pretty important, and you need all of those people. That's how society has been built over the course of time here on the since societies have been formed, past the cavemen and all that. Societies formed because people need other people to make sure everything gets done, and it's the same type of thing in a situation like that. Everything becomes really local, rather than when all the supply chains and all that start to get disrupted. So, yeah. And I mentioned a little bit on there, just the morale part of it. But in this, I found this article on Graceful Little honeybee. I don't know who they are. No, I don't. They're not one of my go-to reading sources. But she had a lot of good points in here, so I just wanted to grab a screenshot of it. But she talks about endurance, creativity, determination, and inflexibility. And I think all four of these are really important when you're thinking about not just a depression type event, recession or whatever, but a lot of stuff in preparedness, right? Having that ability to kind of think on your feet, to do things that are kind of outside of the norm, that aren't the things that everybody else is doing, depending on the grocery store to have all of your food, being kind of a MacGyver when it comes to fixing stuff, all the stuff we've been talking about today. But that mental fortitude, I think, is super important when you're talking about any disaster, not just some sort of monetary disaster.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think mental fortitude gets back to like we were talking about earlier, right? Not hitting the bank card, not hitting the credit card when you want, like having that fortitude, right? The endurance to deal with that, the creativity to think a way around having to do that.
Be able to tell yourself no.
Yeah, right. The determination to do that, right? And again, the flexibility requires flexibility, creativity, flexibility, that all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And the creativity, when you're thinking about situations where money might be tight or there may be shortages or, all of these different things, that creativity, and that's why we sort of try to learn all the stuff we do in preparedness, because that builds that kind of that creativity library. It teaches us different options to do different things. And I think that's back in those days, it wasn't a choice back then. It was, if you wanted something done, you had to figure it out. And I think that's where the creativity, I think that's kind of where I got it from my grandmother and stuff, because I am always trying to figure, maybe it's just in my brain or whatever, just how it works, but I'm always trying to figure out different ways to do things or how something works and try to figure those things out. So the final one I've got here is the most important lesson, I think, and that's just prep. All of this stuff is all stuff that we need to learn and everything. But the biggest thing you can do is start building up your food storage, building up your preparedness knowledge, all of these things that can, if something ever does happen, that you have the ability to have something to fall back on, lean on. You've learned some of these skills, like the gardening, the canning, all these skills that your grandma used to do. You've learned all of that stuff. So the most important thing, I think, is just prep. Basically get ready for all of this stuff, because we don't know how the next few months are going to turn out. We don't know how the next few years are going to turn out. So I think that's the most important one.
Yeah, I agree.
So at any rate, that was 7 different ones. Do you have anything else on that, Brian? I mean, I know there's a whole bunch of things when it comes to, you look back at what your grandparents did, and I think, or you can read some stuff and you can watch some old, maybe History Channel movies and all of that. But when you look back, I think that's kind of what we need to think about when, with preparedness, because everything's super easy, and it's fantastic that it's all super easy. But what happens when that super easy goes away? How many people do you think are going to be able to deal with that? Not many. Not many. So, All right. Well, that's it for today. Appreciate it, everyone. Take care. Prepare. We'll talk to you all later.
Bye, y'all.